Thomas Harper stood near the back entrance of his flagship restaurant, Harper's Haven, an establishment revered as a culinary gem in the heart of Chicago. The evening rush was building, the sound of clattering pans and barked orders blending with the muffled hum of the city outside. His sharp eyes, lined with years of dedication, scanned the bustling staff. For a moment, his gaze lingered on a familiar figure, Claudia Mathers, the general manager who had overseen this location for the past 6 years. The air around Thomas carried the weight of unspoken tension. Complaints about Claudia had been piling up. Accusations of favoritism, racial bias, harsh treatment, and cutting corners that jeopardized the restaurant's hard-earned reputation. Staff turnover had risen sharply, and Thomas had heard enough unsettling whispers to decide that it was time to step in personally. Claudia had always presented herself as a polished, effective leader, someone who could charm even the most skeptical investors during his visits. But Thomas knew all too well that appearances could be deceiving. He ran a hand over his neatly combed hair and sighed. His restaurant was built on the principle of inclusivity, a place where employees felt valued and customers could indulge in a luxurious dining experience without judgment or bias. Yet the recurring complaints suggested that Claudia had turned it into a hostile workplace. It wasn't the first time Thomas had considered addressing the situation directly with Claudia. However, he knew from experience that individuals like her often had ready excuses, polished explanations, and a talent for manipulation. If he was going to confront her, he needed evidence, solid proof of her actions. Thomas had a plan, one he'd executed before, but never with stakes this high. He would go undercover, blending in with the kitchen staff as a new dishwasher. Earlier in the week, he had coordinated with the head chef, Miguel Alvarez, to add a new hire named Tom, a lowly dishwasher with no culinary credentials. Miguel was unaware of the ruse, only informed that Tom was someone Thomas trusted to observe and report back, discreetly. As the day of the plan unfolded, Thomas exchanged his usual tailored suits for a faded hoodie, ripped jeans, and a pair of old sneakers. He donned a slightly stained apron and tucked his usually impeccable hair under a baseball cap. The transformation was startling. The Thomas Harper who graced the pages of culinary magazines was unrecognizable. Taking a deep breath, Thomas pushed open the kitchen door and stepped into the organized chaos of Harper's Haven. The air was thick with the aroma of sizzling meats, tangy sauces, and freshly baked bread. Miguel looked up briefly from his station and barked, "Tom, right? You're on dishes tonight. Keep up and don't get in anyone's way." Thomas gave a slight nod, keeping his voice low to maintain the guise. "Yes, chef." Miguel barely spared him another glance, his focus snapping back to the orders streaming in. Thomas found the dishwashing station tucked in a corner, a mountain of dirty plates awaiting him. He rolled up his sleeves and got to work, his hands quickly finding a rhythm in the repetitive task. As he scrubbed, he kept his ears attuned to the voices around him. Within minutes, Claudia's unmistakable voice echoed through the kitchen. Sharp, commanding, and laced with an air of superiority, she moved like a storm cloud. Conversations among the staff dropped to whispers as she entered, her presence stifling the room. Thomas watched her from the corner of his eye as she inspected the kitchen, her gaze sweeping over every detail, her lips pursed in disapproval. One of the servants stopped. "Is table 4's order delayed again?" she snapped, her heels clicking on the tiled floor as she approached Miguel. "We don't pay you to play around." Miguel's jaw tightened, but he responded evenly, "It's being plated now. 2 minutes." Claudia's critical gaze darted to Thomas and her expression turned sour. "And who's this?" she asked, her tone dripping with disdain. "Another one of your last-minute hires?" "Tom," Miguel replied curtly. "Dish duty." Claudia crossed her arms, her voice dropping to a cold sneer as she addressed Thomas directly. "I hope you know how to keep up. We've had too many slackers come through here. If you can't handle the pace, don't waste my time." Thomas kept his head down and murmured, "Understood." The rest of the evening unfolded as Thomas had feared. Claudia's management style wasn't just strict, it was oppressive. She berated a waitress, Isabella Morales, for stumbling with a tray, her harsh words echoing across the kitchen. She reprimanded a young line cook, Jamal, for an overcooked filet, though it was clear he had been scrambling to cover for a colleague who had called out sick. Her leadership relied on intimidation, not respect. Thomas observed everything, his anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. By the end of the shift, he had already gathered enough evidence to confirm the complaints weren't exaggerations. They were understatements. As he exited the restaurant that night, his heart heavy, Thomas knew one thing for certain. Claudia Mathers had to go, but removing her wouldn't be enough. He needed to rebuild the trust of his staff, repair the reputation of Harper's Haven, and ensure that no manager could ever repeat her toxic behavior. Thomas stood at the street corner after his first shift, the cold air biting through his thin hoodie. The bustling city seemed indifferent to the drama unfolding within Harper's Haven, its bright lights and endless noise masking the toxic reality he'd uncovered. As cars honked and pedestrians bustled past, Thomas replayed the evening in his mind. Claudia's behavior wasn't just bad management. It was a betrayal of everything the restaurant stood for. It seemed counterintuitive because Westchester built its reputation on meeting with perfect civility. To him, Claudia was the very opposite: stubborn, resistant. He considered his next move carefully. Confronting Claudia directly might expose her duplicity, but it wouldn't address the systemic damage she'd caused. The staff needed more than a figurehead to step down. They needed tangible changes to ensure they were heard and respected moving forward. Thomas returned to his modest apartment, a far cry from the luxury penthouse he usually inhabited. It was another layer to his disguise, a temporary sanctuary where he could work without distractions. He sat at the small kitchen table, opened his laptop, and began drafting a plan. His strategy would involve 3 parts: observing Claudia's behavior further, interviewing staff members individually to gather their experiences, and identifying the best candidates within the team to assume leadership roles once Claudia was removed. The next morning, Thomas arrived early at Harper's Haven, slipping into the dish station unnoticed. The morning prep team was in full swing, chopping vegetables, kneading dough, and organizing ingredients. He noticed a young prep cook, Evelyn Tran, meticulously slicing carrots into perfect julienne strips. She worked with such precision that Thomas couldn't help but admire her skill. "You've got a steady hand," Thomas remarked casually, keeping his voice low. Evelyn glanced up, startled. She was petite but carried herself with a quiet determination. "Thanks," she said shyly before quickly returning to her task. "You've been here long?" Thomas asked, scrubbing a pot to maintain the guise. "A year," Evelyn replied. Her tone was cautious, but her eyes betrayed exhaustion. "It's a good job. Most days." "And the others?" he pressed gently. Evelyn hesitated, her hands pausing mid-chop. "Claudia can be difficult," she said carefully, as if testing how much she could trust him. "But I guess it's just how things are." Thomas nodded but said nothing further. He didn't want to push too hard and risk raising suspicion. Instead, he observed how Evelyn interacted with her peers. She helped a new hire organize ingredients, offered tips to a fellow cook struggling with a recipe, and even managed to calm a minor argument between 2 staff members over station space. Thomas made a mental note. Evelyn had potential. As the day progressed, Thomas noticed Claudia's sharp tone escalating. She reprimanded a server for using the wrong wine glasses for a table, loudly enough for customers to overhear. She ordered a busboy to redo his setup 3 times, each time rolling her eyes with exaggerated impatience. Her demeanor created a ripple of unease that infected the entire staff. During the lull between lunch and dinner, Thomas took a calculated risk. He approached Jamal, the young line cook he'd seen chastised the night before. Jamal was leaning against the counter, sipping water and wiping his brow. His expression was one of quiet resignation. "Rough shift?" Thomas asked, offering a small smile. Jamal chuckled humorlessly. "You could say that. Claudia really keeps things intense, huh?" Jamal glanced around to ensure no one was listening before replying. "She's impossible, always has been. I've been here 3 years and it's only gotten worse. People quit all the time because of her." Thomas leaned against the wall, pretending to wipe his hands on a towel. "Why stick around?" Jamal shrugged. "Bills don't stop just because the boss is awful. I've got student loans, rent, my mom's medical expenses. I can't afford to leave. None of us can." Thomas felt a pang of guilt. His undercover role meant he couldn't reveal the support he planned to offer, but Jamal's words solidified his resolve. Claudia wasn't just a bad manager. She was a symbol of the broken system that allowed abuse to thrive unchecked. As dinner service began, Thomas noticed a shift in the kitchen dynamic. Claudia had received a call, her demeanor turning cold and defensive. "Yes, Mr. Harper," she said, her voice dripping with false politeness. "Of course, everything is running smoothly. We're on track to exceed targets this month." Thomas smirked inwardly. Claudia's call with his assistant must have reminded her that the owner's watchful eye was still on the restaurant, even if she didn't know how closely. When the call ended, Claudia's frustration boiled over. She barked orders louder than before, her temper spilling onto everyone in her path. A minor mistake by Isabella, a server who accidentally delivered an order to the wrong table, was met with an outburst so severe that tears welled in the young woman's eyes. "That's it," Thomas muttered under his breath. He stepped away from the dish station and approached Isabella, who was trying to compose herself near the storage room. "Hey," he said softly, keeping his tone supportive. "You okay?" Isabella wiped her eyes quickly and nodded. "Yeah, it's fine. I'll be fine." "It's not fine," Thomas replied gently. "You shouldn't have to deal with that." She looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "Thanks, but it doesn't matter. Claudia always wins. No one can stand up to her." Thomas met her gaze, his expression firm. "That's going to change." Isabella frowned, confusion crossing her face. But before she could respond, a loud crash interrupted them. Back in the kitchen, Claudia was berating Miguel for a dropped tray of plated dishes. Her voice carried above the clamor. "This is why we can't get anything right. How many times do I have to clean up after your incompetence?" Thomas returned to his station, his blood boiling. Miguel, normally unflappable, looked visibly shaken. The rest of the kitchen staff worked in tense silence, their movements more robotic than usual. Claudia's wrath had drained the energy from the room. As the evening wound down, Thomas began formulating the next steps of his plan. Confronting Claudia was inevitable, but it had to be done in a way that not only exposed her behavior, but also empowered the staff to rebuild their trust in the leadership. The next morning, Thomas scheduled a meeting with Miguel and the assistant manager Rachel Lynn, who had been with the company even longer than Claudia. While Rachel had always been professional, her cautious demeanor suggested she was wary of stepping out of line. Thomas needed her on his side. Seated in a small conference room at the restaurant's headquarters, Thomas dropped the pretense. "Miguel, Rachel," he began. "I've been undercover at Harper's Haven for the past few days." Miguel's eyebrows shot up, while Rachel's mouth fell open in shock. "Undercover?" Rachel echoed. "Why?" "To see the truth," Thomas replied. "I've heard too many complaints about Claudia, and after what I've witnessed, I know they're true. Her leadership is toxic, and it's hurting both the staff and the restaurant's reputation." Miguel nodded slowly, his expression a mixture of relief and vindication. "It's about time. She's been driving people out for years." Rachel hesitated, glancing nervously at Miguel before speaking. "I've tried to manage the fallout, but she's good at keeping things just below the radar. The numbers look fine, so corporate doesn't question her methods." "Not anymore," Thomas said firmly. "I'm removing her from her position effective immediately." Miguel exhaled sharply, and Rachel's shoulders visibly relaxed. "Thank you," she murmured. Thomas leaned forward, his gaze intent. "But that's just the beginning. Claudia's departure won't fix the culture overnight. That's where you two come in. I need your help to rebuild trust, address the staff's concerns, and ensure this never happens again." Miguel nodded. "Whatever you need, I'm in." Rachel hesitated for a moment before giving a determined nod. "Me too." "Good," Thomas said, a small smile playing on his lips, "because Harper's Haven is about to become the restaurant it was always meant to be." The staff lounge was silent as the employees of Harper's Haven gathered for an unscheduled meeting. The unexpected summons had stirred whispers among the workers. Most assumed it was another lecture from Claudia or some announcement about cost-cutting measures. They sat on mismatched chairs and stools, tension etched across their faces. Thomas Harper entered the room quietly, his calm presence immediately commanding attention. He looked nothing like the dishwasher who had been scrubbing plates in the kitchen only days ago. Instead, he wore a tailored suit, his demeanor as polished as his appearance. His assistant, Renee, followed him, carrying a folder thick with papers. Thomas took a moment to study the room. The staff were clearly uneasy, their eyes darting between him and Renee. He had no intention of keeping them in suspense. Clearing his throat, he spoke, his voice steady but warm. "Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join me on such short notice." A ripple of confusion spread through the room. The staff rarely saw the owner, and certainly not in a setting like this. Thomas clasped his hands in front of him and continued. "I've spent the past week working alongside you in the kitchen, though most of you didn't know it was me," he began. "I went undercover to see firsthand what's been happening here." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Evelyn, seated near the back, exchanged a wide-eyed glance with Jamal. Even Miguel looked taken aback, though he'd been briefed earlier. "I've seen the long hours you work, the dedication you bring, and the struggles you face. And I've also witnessed the toxic behavior that's been allowed to fester under Claudia's management." At the mention of Claudia, the room fell deathly silent. Thomas could feel the tension, the fear, that any criticism of her would somehow find its way back. He pressed on, determined to ease their concerns. "As of today, Claudia Mathers is no longer with Harper's Haven." The announcement was met with stunned silence, quickly followed by a wave of whispers. The disbelief was palpable, but Thomas noticed the faintest glimmers of relief on some faces. Isabella wiped at her eyes, her expression a mixture of shock and hope. Thomas held up a hand to quiet the murmurs. "I know this news might be unexpected, but it's necessary. Claudia's actions were not in line with the values of this restaurant or this company. Harper's Haven was built on respect, inclusion, and excellence, values that many of you embody every day, and it's time we return to those principles." He let his words sink in before continuing. "I also want to acknowledge something important. Removing one person doesn't fix everything. Many of you have been hurt by the culture that's developed here, and rebuilding that trust will take time. But I promise you this, things will change." Thomas turned to Renee, who handed him a stack of papers. "Starting next week, we'll be implementing several changes. First, we're introducing an anonymous feedback system. Any concerns you have about management, working conditions, anything, can be shared directly with me. Second, we'll be hosting regular staff meetings where your voices will be heard. This is your workplace, and you deserve a say in how it operates. And third," a quiet murmur of approval rippled through the room. Thomas noted the tentative nods and exchanged glances, a far cry from the guarded silence that had defined the team only days ago. "And finally," Thomas added, "we're launching a mentorship program to help employees grow within the company. Whether you want to move up to management, refine your skills in the kitchen, or explore new opportunities, we're here to support you." Evelyn raised a hand timidly. "Will this include training for new positions?" Thomas smiled. "Absolutely. If you're interested in learning a new role, we'll make sure you have the resources and guidance to succeed." For the first time, Evelyn's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. Miguel, standing near the door, gave her a small nod of encouragement. Thomas glanced around the room, his expression softening. "I know many of you have endured a lot under Claudia's leadership, but I want to assure you that those days are behind us. This restaurant belongs to all of us, and together we'll make it a place we can all be proud of." Later that evening, Thomas lingered in the dining area as the restaurant filled with its usual crowd of patrons. He wasn't here to work undercover anymore, but he couldn't help observing the flow of operations. Without Claudia's looming presence, the energy in the kitchen was lighter, the staff moving with a newfound sense of purpose. Thomas made his way to the kitchen where he found Miguel at the pass, calmly overseeing the orders. "How's it going?" Thomas asked. Miguel smiled. "Better, much better. The team's adjusting, but it'll take time." Thomas nodded. "Let me know if you need anything." As Thomas turned to leave, Jamal approached, his hands nervously fidgeting with a towel. "Mr. Harper?" "Yes, Jamal?" The young cook hesitated, then said, "I just wanted to say thank you for everything." Thomas smiled. "You're welcome, Jamal. And thank you for sticking it out. You're part of what makes this place great." Jamal's face lit up with pride as he returned to his station. Thomas watched him go, a sense of satisfaction settling over him. The journey to rebuild Harper's Haven was just beginning, but for the first time in months, he felt confident it was on the right path. A week later, the changes were already beginning to take root. The feedback system had received a flood of submissions, some anonymous, others signed by employees who felt empowered to speak openly. Suggestions ranged from menu improvements to requests for more breaks, and Thomas made it a point to review each one personally. Evelyn had taken him up on the mentorship program, expressing interest in becoming a sous chef. Miguel had immediately stepped in, assigning her tasks that challenged her while providing guidance and encouragement. Jamal, too, had begun mentoring newer line cooks, his confidence growing with each passing day. But the most striking transformation was in Isabella. Freed from Claudia's oppressive scrutiny, she had started taking on more responsibilities, even volunteering to train new servers. Her warm demeanor and attention to detail quickly made her a favorite among both staff and customers. One evening, as Thomas watched the team in action, he was approached by a regular patron, Mr. Caldwell, who owned several businesses in the city. "Thomas," Caldwell said, shaking his hand warmly, "I don't know what you've done here, but the change is remarkable. The food's always been great, but now the atmosphere feels different, livelier, happier." Thomas smiled, glancing toward the kitchen, where Miguel and Evelyn were laughing over a shared joke. "It's the people," he said simply. "They're the heart of this place." As the night wound down, Thomas sat at his usual table, reflecting on the week since Claudia's departure. The road ahead was still long, there would be setbacks and challenges, but the foundation was strong. Harper's Haven was no longer just a restaurant, it was a community, one where every voice mattered. And as Thomas raised a glass of wine in quiet celebration, he knew he'd achieved something far greater than uncovering the truth. He had restored hope. Thomas lingered in his office late that night, the faint hum of the city outside his window a constant reminder of the endless activity around him. The day's successes brought a sense of satisfaction, but his mind was still occupied with the bigger picture. Harper's Haven wasn't just one restaurant. It was a flagship symbol of his brand and ethos. If Claudia's behavior had festered unnoticed here, how could he be sure that similar issues weren't happening at his other locations? Maybe this time, his risk-taking training would do more than just resign him, if his early attempts at restoration had worked so well. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. For years, he had trusted his regional managers to oversee day-to-day operations, believing that his occasional visits were enough to keep things running smoothly. Claudia's tenure had shattered that illusion. It wasn't just about trusting the right people. It was about building systems that actively prevented such toxicity from taking root. The idea hit him like a bolt of lightning, a dedicated employee advocacy program, not just for Harper's Haven, but for every restaurant in the Harper's hospitality group. Thomas turned to his laptop and began drafting the framework. The program would be centered on 3 key principles: accountability, transparency, and empowerment. A team of employee advocates, independent of restaurant management, would conduct regular check-ins, handle complaints, and ensure that staff had a direct line to leadership without fear of retribution. He added a clause for surprise audits, not to catch employees off guard, but to ensure that the working conditions matched what managers reported. These audits would include anonymous interviews with staff, providing a clear snapshot of the workplace culture. Thomas paused, considering the long-term impact. This wasn't just a solution to prevent another Claudia, it was a chance to set a new industry standard. With the program drafted, he sent a message to his executive team to schedule a meeting the following week. He would need their input to fine-tune the plan, but for now, he had a roadmap. The next morning, Thomas arrived at Harper's Haven earlier than usual, greeted by the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the muffled chatter of the breakfast staff. He had scheduled a private meeting with Evelyn and Jamal, intending to discuss their potential growth within the company. Evelyn arrived first, her usually reserved demeanor brightened by a newfound confidence. "Mr. Harper," she greeted, her voice steady but polite. "Thank you for inviting me." Thomas smiled warmly. "Evelyn, call me Thomas. You've been doing incredible work and I wanted to talk about where you see yourself in the future." Her cheeks flushed slightly. "Honestly, I love working in the kitchen, but I'd like to learn more about the business side of things. Planning menus, sourcing ingredients, understanding costs. I want to be a chef who doesn't just cook, but leads." Thomas nodded, impressed by her ambition. "That's an excellent goal. We can start you on a mentorship track with Miguel to get hands-on experience, And once you're ready, we'll enroll you in a management program to build those skills further." Evelyn's eyes widened. "Really? I didn't think those opportunities were open to someone like me." "Opportunities should be open to anyone who works hard and has the passion to grow," Thomas replied. "And you've proven both." Jamal entered moments later, his usual nervous energy replaced by a quiet determination. Thomas gestured for him to sit, noting the way Jamal's shoulders squared as he took his seat. "Jamal, I wanted to commend you for stepping up recently. Your work ethic and leadership haven't gone unnoticed," Thomas began. Jamal blinked, momentarily stunned. "Thank you, Mr. Thomas. That means a lot." "I wanted to ask about your long-term plans," Thomas said. "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" Jamal hesitated, clearly unaccustomed to being asked such questions. I've always wanted to run my own kitchen someday, but I know I have a lot to learn." Thomas leaned forward, his tone encouraging. "You've got the talent, Jamal, and the drive. What you need now is experience and guidance. How would you feel about taking on a more active role in training new line cooks? Miguel and I can help you refine your skills, and over time you'll be ready for a sous chef position." Jamal's expression shifted from disbelief to a cautious smile. "I'd love that. Thank you for believing in me." Thomas nodded. "It's not just belief, it's trust. You've earned this, and I'm confident you'll do great things." Over the next few weeks, the changes Thomas had implemented began to reshape the culture at Harper's Haven. The anonymous feedback system proved invaluable, uncovering small issues before they became larger problems. Staff felt more comfortable voicing concerns, and Thomas made sure each submission received a thoughtful response. The mentorship program gained traction, with Evelyn and Jamal serving as its first success stories. Evelyn shadowed Miguel during planning sessions, gaining insight into menu design and budgeting. Meanwhile, Jamal had become a go-to mentor for newer cooks, his patience and expertise earning him respect among his peers. But the most striking transformation was the team dynamic. The oppressive tension that once plagued the kitchen was gone, replaced by an atmosphere of collaboration and mutual respect. Isabella, who had once feared Claudia's wrath, now volunteered to lead team-building exercises during staff meetings. Even the dining room staff, often overlooked in favor of the kitchen crew, felt the shift. Servers began sharing customer feedback with the kitchen in real time, fostering a sense of unity across departments. One evening, during a particularly busy dinner service, Thomas noticed a family seated near the open kitchen window. They were visibly enjoying their meal, their laughter carrying across the dining room. One of the children, a curious boy of about 8, stood on his chair to peer into the kitchen, his eyes wide with wonder. Miguel, noticing the boy, smiled and handed him a small cup of sorbet through the window. The boy's face lit up, and the parents beamed with gratitude. It was a small gesture, but it encapsulated the heart of what Harper's Haven had become, a place where warmth and connection were as important as the food. As the months passed, Harper's Haven became the blueprint for Thomas's vision across his restaurant group. The employee advocacy program was rolled out company-wide, with each location appointing a dedicated advocate to ensure transparency and support. Thomas made unannounced visits to his other restaurants, eager to see how the changes were being embraced. In New Orleans, he met a line cook who had been promoted to sous chef after years of being overlooked. In San Francisco, a server shared how the feedback system had allowed her to suggest improvements that increased efficiency during busy brunch hours. The stories were different, but the theme was the same. People felt valued, heard, and respected. Harper's hospitality group gained recognition not just for its culinary excellence, but for its progressive workplace culture. Industry publications wrote glowing features about the company's transformation, and competitors began adopting similar practices. But for Thomas, the greatest reward came during a staff appreciation event held at Harper's Haven. The entire team had gathered for a night of celebration. The restaurant closed to the public for the occasion. Miguel and Evelyn manned the grills, flipping burgers and skewers, while Jamal served as the impromptu DJ, playing a mix of upbeat tracks that had everyone dancing. Thomas stood at the edge of the crowd, a quiet smile on his face. Watching his team laugh, dance, and share stories, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Harper's Haven wasn't just a restaurant anymore, it was a family. As the night wore on, Isabella approached Thomas, a plate of grilled vegetables in hand. "Mr. Harper," she began, "I just wanted to say thank you for everything. I never thought I'd look forward to coming to work again, but you've made that possible." Thomas accepted the plate, his smile widening. "Thank you, Isabella, but this is a team effort. You're as much a part of this change as I am." She nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Well, we're lucky to have you leading us." Thomas watched as Isabella returned to the crowd, her laughter blending with the music and chatter. In that moment, he knew that while challenges would inevitably arise, the foundation they had built would endure. And for the first time in a long while, Thomas allowed himself to simply enjoy the moment, surrounded by the people who had brought his vision to life. Harper's Haven wasn't just back on track, it was thriving, a testament to the power of resilience, respect, and shared purpose. As the weeks turned into months, the ripple effects of Thomas's reforms extended far beyond Harper's Haven. Employees at sister restaurants across the Harper hospitality group began to experience the same shifts in culture, and word spread throughout the industry. Harper's Haven became a symbol of what a workplace could achieve when leadership prioritized people over profits. One morning, Thomas sat in his office reviewing a letter that had arrived from a former employee. The letter was from Maria Gomez, a line cook who had quit a year earlier due to Claudia's mistreatment. In the note, Maria thanked Thomas for making the changes she'd always wished for during her time at Harper's Haven. She mentioned that the news of Claudia's removal had reached her through a friend, and that she hoped to return someday. The letter struck a chord with Thomas. While he was proud of what had been accomplished, it reminded him that the effects of poor leadership often left scars that lingered long after someone had moved on. He decided to reach out to Maria directly, inviting her for a meeting to discuss opportunities to rejoin the team. 2 weeks later, Maria sat across from Thomas in his office, her hands nervously folded in her lap. "Thank you for reaching out, Mr. Harper," she said softly. "I wasn't expecting to hear from you, especially after how I left." Thomas leaned forward, his expression warm. "Maria, I want to start by saying I'm sorry for the environment you endured. I wasn't as involved as I should have been, and that allowed things to spiral out of control, but I'm here to make sure that never happens again." Maria's shoulders relaxed slightly, though the skepticism in her eyes remained. "It sounds like things are better now. I've heard good things from friends who still work here." "They are better," Thomas agreed. "But I also know there's more to do. That's why I wanted to meet with you. I think you could play a vital role in helping us continue this progress." Maria blinked, surprised. "Me? How?" "I want to offer you a leadership position in the kitchen," Thomas said. "You've always been a strong cook, and your ability to connect with others is something we need. You've seen firsthand what doesn't work, and that perspective is invaluable as we move forward." Maria hesitated, her gaze searching Thomas's face for sincerity. "What if I can't handle it? What if I'm not ready?" Thomas smiled. "Maria, no one's ever completely ready for something new, but I believe in your ability to learn and grow. You won't be alone in this. We'll support you every step of the way." Maria nodded slowly, her expression shifting from doubt to cautious optimism. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll do it." Maria's return to Harper's Haven was met with enthusiasm from the staff, who remembered her. Evelyn and Jamal in particular welcomed her warmly, eager to show her how much the environment had changed. Thomas arranged for Maria to shadow Miguel for a month, before taking on her new role as kitchen lead. Under Maria's guidance, the kitchen began experimenting with new menu items, incorporating seasonal ingredients and culinary techniques that reflected the diverse backgrounds of the staff. One evening, Maria suggested a fusion dish, a blend of Latin American and Asian flavors inspired by her and Evelyn's heritage. The dish became an instant hit, earning rave reviews from diners and food critics alike. Outside of the restaurant, Thomas continued to expand the advocacy program. He partnered with a nonprofit organization that specialized in workplace inclusivity training, inviting them to host workshops across all Harper hospitality locations. The training sessions went beyond the basics, effective communication, and the importance of mental health support. During one workshop, Thomas sat alongside his employees, participating in a role-playing exercise designed to foster empathy. The experience was eye-opening, even for him. He realized how easy it was to overlook small actions or comments that could make someone feel excluded or undervalued. At the end of the session, one of the facilitators approached Thomas. "It's rare to see an owner so actively involved in this kind of work," she said. "It sets a powerful example for your team." Thomas smiled. "I can't expect my employees to invest in change if I'm not willing to do the same." As the holiday season approached, Harper's Haven hosted its first Community Appreciation Night, an event open to the public with discounted meals and live entertainment. The idea had been proposed by Isabella, who believed the restaurant could do more to give back to its loyal patrons. The evening was a resounding success. Families filled the dining room, children giggling as they decorated cookies at a special station set up by the pastry chef. A local jazz trio performed in the corner, their melodies adding warmth to the already festive atmosphere. Thomas, dressed in a casual sweater, moved through the crowd, greeting guests and thanking them for their support. At one table, he found an elderly couple who had been regulars since the restaurant first opened. They shared stories of their favorite meals and the milestones they had celebrated at Harper's Haven over the years. "It's not just a restaurant to us," the woman said, her eyes misty. "It's a place where we've made memories. Thank you for keeping that alive." Thomas felt a lump rise in his throat as he replied, "Thank you for being part of our journey. This place wouldn't be the same without you." As the evening wound down, Thomas found himself standing near the kitchen window, watching his team work seamlessly together. Maria was plating dishes with practiced ease, Jamal was offering tips to a newer cook, and Evelyn was chatting animatedly with Miguel about ideas for the winter menu. For the first time in a long while, Thomas felt a profound sense of peace. Harper's Haven was more than a restaurant. It was a testament to the power of perseverance, compassion, and the belief that change was always possible. As he stepped outside into the crisp night air, Thomas looked up at the stars, a quiet smile on his face. He knew the journey was far from over, but in that moment, he felt ready for whatever lay ahead. Harper's Haven was thriving, and so was the community it had created. Love this story? Click the next video for more, and make sure to subscribe so you never miss our latest uploads.